I'll rewrite the complete story without those section titles. The interstellar blackout. 2 blackouts back to back. Everyone remembers the October 1st United States government shutdown. But the second one, almost nobody knows it happened. On September 1st, a billion-dollar spacecraft locked its cameras onto one of the strangest visitors our solar system has ever seen. The critical moment arrived on September 3rd, and right when history should have been written in golden letters, the cameras went dark, not for hours. For entire days, that opportunity was lost forever. The question that echoes in the darkness is simple but terrifying. Accident or deliberate intention? What could NASA have seen that demanded such silence? Tonight, we are pulling back the curtain on the blackout. What emerges is not simply unsettling, it is proof of what many of us have feared about this interstellar visitor. If these revelations put your nerves on edge like they have done to me, prepare yourself for a journey that will question everything you thought you knew about transparency in space science. Share your opinion on whether you think we are being told the whole truth, or just the version they want us to see. NASA turned off its feed, not the entire space program, not the complete internet, but something very specific happened in the first week of September 2025 that we still cannot fully explain. A spacecraft called Psyche, a mission launched to study a metal asteroid millions of miles away, was scheduled to photograph something that came to visit us from interstellar space. That something was an object called 3I Atlas, and according to NASA's own public schedule, Psyche was supposed to capture images of this visitor on approximately September 3rd or 4th, 2025. But here is what is strange. When researchers went looking for those images in NASA's public archive, in the raw image database where every photograph Psyche takes is supposedly uploaded for all the world to see, they found nothing. No images from September 1st. No images from September 2nd, no images from September 3rd or 4th, no images from September 5th. The archive simply went silent. Then on September 8th, the images resumed. 3 days, a 72-hour gap in a spacecraft's publicly available data during one of the most anticipated astronomical events of the year, and nobody officially explained why. The Psyche spacecraft itself is not some forgotten probe gathering dust in a corner of the solar system. This is a cutting-edge mission funded by NASA with hundreds of millions of dollars, equipped with high-resolution imaging cameras capable of capturing metallic surfaces in stunning detail. The whole reason Psyche was built was to get close to a metal asteroid named 16 Psyche and photograph it with precision that would rival some of the best cameras on Earth. So this spacecraft, this technological achievement was ideally suited to observe 3I Atlas as it passed through our neighborhood. NASA's own publicly posted mission overview specifically listed 3I Atlas as one of Psyche's planned targets. It was not a secret. It was not classified. It was announced. And then when the moment came, when the spacecraft was positioned and ready, when the window of opportunity was open, the images disappeared from public view. What exactly is 3I Atlas? It is an interstellar object. That means it did not originate from our solar system. It came from somewhere else in the galaxy, traveling through the void of space at tremendous speed. And in 2025, it passed close enough to Earth that scientists everywhere wanted to study it. We do not get many chances to examine visitors from the stars. When they arrive, the entire astronomical community mobilizes, telescopes point upward, spacecraft adjust their orbits. Data flows in real time. This is the kind of moment that shapes scientific understanding. This is the kind of moment that makes discoveries, except this time, for those crucial 3 days, nothing flowed at all. Community researchers, astronomers, and space enthusiasts who monitor these archives regularly noticed the gap immediately. They flagged it. They discussed it online. They asked questions. But NASA offered no official explanation. Not a comment about a technical malfunction. Not a statement about data processing delays. Not even a simple acknowledgement that the gap existed. The agency simply allowed the silence to remain. Now, someone might say that the gap could have been caused by the United States government shutdown scheduled for October 1st, 2025. Maybe data backup systems failed. Maybe something about the shutdown affected the archive. But that does not make sense. The shutdown happened in October. The gap happened in September. An event that occurs after something cannot explain something that happened before it. The timeline does not support that explanation. So we are left with a mystery that belongs to no external event, no scheduled maintenance window, no known technical failure. It is a gap that, as far as we know, nobody has ever adequately explained. Consider what this means for a moment. Consider that we live in an age of radical transparency in space science. Every image from the James Webb Space Telescope is published. Every photograph from the Mars rovers appears online within hours. Every data point from a dozen different space agencies flows to the public archives almost automatically. Yet here in this specific case, during this specific window with this specific object, the system simply shut down. The question becomes not just what happened, but why. Did Psyche fail to point at 3I Atlas as planned? Did the camera malfunction at exactly the wrong moment? Did something else entirely occur that we have not yet been told? Or, and this is the thought that lingers, did the images get taken and then deliberately removed from public access? What would cause an agency to make that choice? We do not yet know, but we are about to discover that this gap is not an isolated incident. This is the beginning of a pattern. This is the first thread in a much larger tapestry of silence, delay and mystery that stretches across multiple space agencies, multiple missions, and multiple weeks. This is the opening of what we might call the blackout. And as we pull that thread, the entire landscape of what NASA and ESA have been doing with 3I Atlas data starts to unravel in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew about transparency in space science. While NASA's Psyche probe was going dark over Earth, something equally strange was happening on the other side of the Atlantic. The European Space Agency, which operates a spacecraft called the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, was also supposed to have access to 3I Atlas as the object moved through the inner solar system. The ExoMars mission normally releases its data to the public within months of collection. Scientists can download images, spectra, and raw measurements. The system is designed to be open. It is designed to be shared. But when researchers looked at ESA's data archive for 3I Atlas observations, they found something that made them pause. The release dates for certain datasets were listed as the year 2099. 2099. That is not a typo that suggests a processing delay of a few weeks or even a few months. That is a date that sits 74 years in the future. It is the kind of timestamp that for all practical purposes locks the data away forever, or at least it locks it away for a period of time so long that most of us will not live to see the information released. At first, many researchers assumed this was a simple metadata glitch, a software error where dates got corrupted or default timestamps got filled in incorrectly. These things do happen in complex information systems. But then something else happened. The dates changed. Not all of them went away, but many of them shifted to a new timestamp, April 3rd, 2026. Suddenly, instead of waiting until the year 2099, researchers were being told they could expect these data sets on April 3rd, 2026. That is 5 months earlier than the original date, but this creates a problem because April 3rd, 2026 is still a significant delay. It is months away. It is a lockbox. The contrast between NASA's approach and ESA's approach is instructive. NASA simply removed the images from public view and said nothing. ESA at least acknowledged that the data exists and that it will be released at some point. But the very fact that ESA felt compelled to set a release date so far in the future raises uncomfortable questions. Why would any space agency deliberately delay the release of scientific data by 6 months or more? In the normal course of operations, data about comets and asteroids and interstellar objects flows to the scientific community almost immediately. Yet here, both agencies seem to be operating under different rules. NASA's silence could be interpreted as a technical glitch, but ESA's deliberate date setting, the fact that someone in their organization specifically chose April 3rd, 2026 as the release date, suggests something more intentional. When you examine the history of space missions, you do find precedents for long embargoes. The Hubble Space Telescope in its early years had a period where data was released to the team that had requested the observations first before being made publicly available. Some Mars rover images have been delayed for scientific processing, but these embargoes typically last weeks or months at most. 74 years is in a category all by itself. 74 years is not a processing delay, it is a decision. It is a choice to lock something away so thoroughly that it effectively disappears from public consciousness. The stated reason when ESA eventually addressed the issue was technical, a metadata problem, a glitch in their system. But the 2099 date raises a different possibility entirely. What if that was not a mistake at all? What if someone somewhere deliberately set that date as a way to hide the information in plain sight? What if a placeholder for classified or sensitive data got left visible in the archive and then had to be cleaned up when people noticed? We cannot know for certain, but the timing, the deliberation, and the shift from one timestamp to another suggest that somebody was making choices about what the public would and would not see. The implications are staggering. If both NASA and ESA were handling 3I Atlas data differently from their normal protocols, if both agencies seem to be delaying or withholding observations, then we are no longer looking at isolated technical problems. We are looking at a pattern. We are looking at something that both organizations deemed significant enough to treat specially, and the question becomes not just what happened, but what did they see that made them decide to lock the data away? What observation required a lockbox? What image or spectrum or data set compelled both a European agency and an American agency to suddenly change their normal procedures for public transparency? The answer to that question might lie in what the object itself was revealing. Because around the same time these archives were going dark, new images and spectroscopic data about 3I Atlas was starting to emerge. And what those images showed was something that no comet had any business showing at all. In August of 2025, new imagery of 3I Atlas became available to researchers. The observations came from ground-based telescopes and from space-based instruments, and when scientists examined the photographs, they saw something that made them sit up straight. There was a jet of material pointing toward the sun. Now, anyone with basic knowledge of comets knows that this is not what is supposed to happen. When a comet approaches the sun, the heat causes ices to sublimate. Those ices turn to gas and dust, and the radiation pressure from the sun's light pushes that material outward away from the star. That is why comets have tails that stream behind them like hair blown in the wind. The tail always points away from the sun. It is as fundamental to comet physics as gravity is to falling objects. Except 3I Atlas did not seem to care about this rule. The spectroscopic data was equally strange. Researchers using the Keck Observatory in Hawaii collected light from 3I Atlas and analyzed it. The results showed emissions of nickel and cyanide, elements that do appear in some comets, but rarely in this particular combination. The object also displayed what scientists called an anti-tail, a secondary tail that forms in front of the primary tail, but in this case pointing in an unusual direction. The behavior did not match any standard comet model. It was as though something was actively pushing material toward the sun, rather than having the sun push material away. Think of the difference between wind pushing leaves outward from a tree and a leaf blower deliberately directing air inward. The sun is supposed to be the leaf blower. The sun is supposed to do the pushing, but 3I Atlas seemed to have its own mechanism. When you combine this sunward jet observation with earlier data from the James Webb Space Telescope that showed 3I Atlas's atmosphere was dominated by carbon dioxide, the picture becomes even stranger. A carbon dioxide-rich coma suggests the object formed near what astronomers call the carbon dioxide ice line, a region in a protoplanetary disk where carbon dioxide would freeze. This is an unusual chemistry for a comet that supposedly originated in the Oort cloud, the reservoir of icy bodies surrounding the solar system. It is unusual chemistry for something that came from interstellar space. It is the kind of chemistry that raises questions about where this object really came from and what mechanisms have been shaping its behavior. The sunward jet in particular haunted the minds of anyone studying the data. A jet pointing toward the sun is not easily explained by natural comet physics. But imagine for a moment a spacecraft. Imagine a vessel traveling through space that needed to dump excess heat or maintain its orientation. A craft pointed toward the stars might vent material toward the sun as a way to recharge, to absorb radiation, or to maintain stability. The direction matters in such scenarios. It is not random. It is purposeful. The timing of this observation release was also peculiar. The August image came out just as Psyche was preparing to observe 3I Atlas in September. The spectroscopic anomalies had already been noted by the scientific community. Everyone knew that this object was behaving strangely. Everyone knew that it displayed properties that did not fit the standard models, and then precisely when a spacecraft with some of the finest imaging equipment in human history was about to take an even closer look, the data flow from that spacecraft stopped. The archive went dark. 3 days of silence. The August observations had whetted everyone's appetite. They had revealed something fundamentally odd about this object, and just when the obvious next step would be to follow up with higher resolution imagery from Psyche, that information vanished. The sunward jet is not just an anomaly, it is a signature. It is the kind of behavior that leads scientists to ask what is happening beneath the surface. When you see a jet pointing the wrong direction, when you see compositions that do not match expectations, when you see an anti-tail that defies conventional explanations, you start to wonder if you are looking at something natural or something else entirely. You start to wonder if this object is behaving according to the laws of physics as we understand them, or if there is another explanation, one that involves technology rather than geology. Consider the historical context. We have seen interstellar visitors before. Oumuamua arrived in 2017 and sparked intense debate about its nature. Its elongated shape, its strange acceleration as it left the solar system, the lack of visible outgassing that would explain that acceleration, all of these features led some scientists to suggest, however cautiously, that Oumuamua might not have been entirely natural. The hypothesis was controversial. It was criticized, but it was discussed in peer-reviewed journals because the evidence demanded an explanation that natural comet models could not provide. 3I Atlas presents similar puzzles. The sunward jet, the unusual chemistry, the timing of the data blackouts just when high-resolution imagery should have been captured. These are not proof of anything artificial, but they are signatures that demand investigation. They are patterns that require explanation. And when the agencies responsible for providing those explanations instead choose to lock away the data, to create gaps in the archive, to set release dates months or years in the future, the public is left to wonder what exactly is being hidden and why. The timeline becomes even more revealing when you lay out all the events in sequence. September 1st, 2025, Psyche locks onto 3I Atlas. The spacecraft is positioned. The cameras are ready. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for. September 3rd through 7th. The archive goes dark. No images appear from Psyche during this critical window. The spacecraft that was supposed to capture unprecedented detail of an interstellar visitor produces nothing that the public can see. September 8th, the archive resumes. Images appear again, but no images of 3I Atlas are among them. No images of the object have ever appeared in any public database as far as anyone has been able to find. October 1st, 2025 brings the United States government shutdown, but this cannot explain the September gap. A future event cannot cause a past event. The shutdown is a red herring in this timeline. It is a possible explanation that does not work. October 3rd through 7th brings a significant astronomical event. The ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter comes closest to 3I Atlas as the object approaches Mars. The spacecraft has instruments capable of capturing detailed data. Researchers from the European Space Agency and international collaborators should have been preparing to analyze these observations. Should have been because the data from this flyby has not yet appeared in any public database. The European Space Agency stated that the information would be available on April 3, 2026. That is months away. That is a lockbox. October 25th and 26th bring another deadline. NASA's Europa Clipper mission has windows to observe 3I Atlas in late October. The spacecraft is heading to Jupiter's moon Europa, but has high-resolution imaging equipment that could photograph an interstellar visitor if properly directed. Will we see those observations? Will the data appear in the archive, or will October bring another silence? April 3rd. 2026 is the currently scheduled date for ESA to release 3I Atlas data. It is written on calendars. It is a commitment. But as we look at this timeline, as we see how the pattern of missing data and deliberate delays has accumulated, we have to ask ourselves whether that date will be kept. We have to ask whether the information will actually flow, or whether we will find more delays, more locked boxes, more classified data sets. What emerges from this timeline is not a series of isolated incidents. It is a constellation of withheld observations, delayed releases, inexplicable absences, and locked databases. We have both American and European agencies treating the same object differently from their normal procedures. We have lockbox dates that seem deliberately set far into the future. We have a spacecraft with extraordinary capabilities going silent during its most important moment. We have data releases scheduled months away when all other science typically flows within weeks. This is not randomness. This is not coincidence. This is a pattern. And patterns exist for reasons. Patterns suggest intention. They suggest coordination. They suggest that multiple organizations have decided, perhaps independently or perhaps in consultation with each other, that certain information about 3I Atlas needs to be kept from public view, at least for now. And that raises the question of what could be so important, so sensitive, so extraordinary, that it would compel two major space agencies to fundamentally alter their normal procedures for transparency and data sharing. The answer might lie in what the object actually is. When 3I Atlas passed close to Mars in early October, it was not only observed by the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. There were other spacecraft in Martian orbit with cameras pointed at the sky. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which carries a camera called HiRISE, one of the most powerful imaging systems we have ever put in space, had the opportunity to observe this interstellar visitor. HiRISE is capable of pixel sizes of roughly 30 centimeters from Mars orbit. It can capture detail that would astound you. It can photograph dust storms on Mars with precision that reveals individual wind patterns. It can see rocks the size of a car from thousands of kilometers away. Given the right viewing geometry, HiRISE could have captured unprecedented detail of 3I Atlas. It could have photographed the nucleus of the object. It could have shown structural features. It could have revealed whether the object has a simple rounded shape like a natural comet, or whether it has something more complex, more geometric, more artificial looking. But where are those images? Have you seen any high-resolution HiRISE photographs of 3I Atlas? Have they been released to the public? Have they appeared in any scientific database? As of now, the answer is no. The images have not materialized. The data has not flowed to the researchers who requested it. If HiRISE captured observations, those observations have been kept from public view just like Psyche's data, just like the ESA data set, just like the high-resolution imagery we might expect from a camera system like that. The history of Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and HiRISE is a history of transparency. The camera has been returning images to Earth for nearly 20 years. Photographs of Mars surface features are released regularly. The camera has also captured imagery of other solar system bodies. When the moons Phobos and Deimos pass in front of the camera, we see those images. When comets pass through the Martian system, we have seen photographs. The default is to release. The standard is to share. Yet when it comes to 3I Atlas, when the object came close to Mars, when HiRISE had the perfect opportunity to capture detail we had never seen before, the data simply did not follow the normal path. Why would that be? One explanation is technical. Perhaps the camera was slated for Mars surface observations during that particular window. Perhaps the pointing priorities of the mission meant that other targets were deemed more important. Perhaps there were processing delays in downloading and transmitting the data. These are all plausible explanations. They are all things that could legitimately delay the public release of an observation. But none of them require the data to be completely absent from the archive. None of them require absolute silence. Normally, when there is a processing delay, the data portal shows that it is being processed. There is a status. There is information about when the data might become available, but consider another possibility. What if HiRISE did observe 3I Atlas? What if it captured high-resolution images that showed something unexpected? What if the camera revealed structural features on the object that surprised the researchers? What if the data suggested that 3I Atlas was not simply a comet but something else, something with properties that demanded further investigation and internal review before any public release? In that scenario, the data would be held back. It would be analyzed carefully. It would pass through multiple levels of scrutiny, and it might be classified, at least temporarily, until decisions could be made about what to tell the public and how to tell it. The absence of high-res imagery combined with the absence of psyche imagery combined with the delayed ESA data creates a picture of systematic data withholding across multiple instruments and multiple agencies. We are no longer talking about one spacecraft going dark. We are talking about a coordinated pattern, where every major high-resolution observation opportunity involving 3I Atlas has resulted in either missing data or delayed data. That is not coincidence. That is a decision made at a level above individual mission control rooms. Consider what a high-resolution image would show that a spectrum cannot. A spectrum tells us about composition, about the elements present in the object's atmosphere. It tells us what is there, but an image tells us shape. It tells us structure. It tells us whether the object has natural rounded features or whether it has edges, angles, geometric forms. It tells us whether we are looking at a natural body shaped by gravitational forces and collision history, or whether we are looking at something built, something constructed, something designed. That is the information that has been systematically withheld. That is the data that multiple agencies have chosen not to share. And the question that lingers in the silence is simple. What did those images show? What structural features did the cameras capture that required this level of secrecy? What geometry did the high-resolution instruments reveal that could not be shared with the scientific community or the public? The pattern of withholding becomes even more disturbing when you consider the precedent it sets. If space agencies can decide unilaterally to classify observations of interstellar objects, if they can create arbitrary embargo dates that lock data away for months or years, if they can simply allow gaps to appear in public archives without explanation or accountability, then what does that mean for the future of space science? The entire foundation of modern astronomy rests on transparency and peer review. Discoveries are made public. Data is shared. Other scientists can verify results, challenge interpretations, and build on findings. This open system has driven every major breakthrough in our understanding of the cosmos. But if that system can be suspended whenever an observation becomes too interesting or too controversial, then we are no longer doing open science, we are doing classified research with selective disclosure. And the public, the taxpayers who fund these missions, the citizens who support space exploration, are left in the dark, literally and figuratively. We are told that transparency is a core value, that every mission is designed to share its findings with the world, but when the moment comes, when the data would actually reveal something important, the shutters close. The archives go silent. The release dates get pushed into the future. This is not how science is supposed to work. This is not how publicly funded research is supposed to operate. And the fact that it is happening with an interstellar object, with something that did not originate in our solar system, with a visitor that might tell us something profound about what exists beyond our cosmic neighborhood, makes the silence even more troubling. Because if 3I Atlas is just a comet, if it is simply a chunk of ice and rock behaving in slightly unusual but ultimately explicable ways, then there is no reason to hide the data. Natural phenomena do not require classification. Comets do not need embargo dates. The images and spectra and measurements should flow freely to researchers and the public without delay or restriction. But if 3I Atlas is something else, if the high-resolution imagery revealed structures that do not fit natural explanations, if the spectroscopic data showed signatures of technology or engineering, if the observations captured something that would fundamentally change our understanding of what is possible in the universe, then the decision to lock away the data makes sense from a certain perspective. It makes sense if you believe the public is not ready for the truth. It makes sense if you think the implications are too destabilizing. It makes sense if you are operating under protocols designed for scenarios that have never been publicly acknowledged. The existence of such protocols is not speculation. We know that governments and space agencies have contingency plans for contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. We know that there are frameworks for deciding what information gets disclosed and when, We know that classification systems exist that can be invoked for national security reasons, even when the research is ostensibly civilian and scientific. What we do not know is whether those protocols have been activated, whether those frameworks are being followed, whether those classification systems have been applied to the 3I Atlas data. But the pattern of silence and delay and systematic withholding suggests that something is happening behind closed doors, something that the public is not being told, something that requires coordination across agencies and nations, something that is deemed important enough to override the normal transparency that defines modern space science. The sunward jet remains the most visible anomaly, the observation that anyone can point to and say, that does not make sense according to conventional comet physics. But the real anomaly might be the silence itself. The real mystery might not be what 3I Atlas is doing, but what NASA and ESA are doing in response to what they have seen. Think about the resources required to maintain this kind of information control. Think about the number of people who would need to be involved. The mission scientists, the data processors, the archive managers, the public affairs officers, the agency leadership. Think about the coordination required to ensure that images do not leak, that whistleblowers do not come forward, that the story remains contained within official channels. This is not a simple cover-up. This is an institutional response that spans multiple organizations and crosses international borders. And yet it is happening. The archives show the gaps. The release dates show the delays. The absence of imagery shows the pattern. This is not speculation or conspiracy theory. This is documented fact that anyone can verify by checking the public databases themselves. The images that should be there are not there. The data that should be available is not available. The transparency that should exist does not exist. So we are left with questions that demand answers. What did Psyche see during those 3 days in September? What did the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter capture in October? What did HiRISE photograph when 3I Atlas passed near Mars? Why are these observations being withheld? Why are the release dates set so far in the future? Why has the normal flow of scientific data been interrupted for this specific object and this specific set of observations? The agencies have not provided satisfactory answers. The official explanations, when they exist at all, do not address the core issues. Technical glitches do not explain systematic patterns. Processing delays do not require complete data blackouts. Metadata errors do not result in 74-year embargo dates followed by carefully chosen April release dates. None of the mundane explanations fit the observed facts. Which brings us to the uncomfortable possibility that the extraordinary explanation might be correct. That 3I Atlas might be something other than a natural comet, that the observations might have revealed structures or behaviors that do not fit our understanding of how celestial objects form and evolve. That the decision to classify the data to create these gaps and delays might be based on something real, something that someone saw in the images, something that required this level of information control. If that is true, if the high-resolution photographs captured evidence of artificial structures or deliberate propulsion or geometric forms that could not have formed naturally, then we are facing a moment that changes everything. We are facing the confirmation that we are not alone in the universe, that intelligent life exists beyond Earth, that visitors from other star systems can and do arrive in our cosmic neighborhood. We are facing the reality that our governments and space agencies knew about this and chose to keep it secret, at least for a time. The implications would be staggering. Every assumption about our place in the cosmos would need to be reconsidered. Every question about the prevalence of life and intelligence in the universe would have a new answer. Every calculation about the likelihood of contact would need to be revised. This would not be an abstract philosophical question anymore. This would be concrete reality backed by photographic evidence and instrumental measurements. But we do not have access to that evidence. We do not have the images. We do not have the data. We have only the gaps and the delays and the pattern of systematic withholding. We have only the questions and the silence that refuses to answer them. And so we wait. We wait for April 3rd, 2026, when ESA has promised to release its data. We wait to see if that promise is kept, or if new delays will appear. We wait for someone inside these organizations to decide that the public deserves to know the truth. that the scientific community should have access to the observations, that transparency matters more than whatever concerns are driving the classification decisions. We wait and we watch the archives, looking for any sign that the pattern might break, that new images might appear, that the data blackout might end. We wait and we ask questions, pushing for explanations, demanding accountability, refusing to accept that silence is an adequate response to mysteries of this magnitude. Because if we stop asking, if we simply accept the gaps and the delays and the locked databases as normal, then we have surrendered our right to know what our spacecraft are discovering. We have accepted that space science can be classified at will, that public missions can produce private results, that the search for knowledge can be subordinated to institutional priorities that we are not allowed to understand. That is not the future we were promised when these missions were funded and launched. That is not the spirit of exploration that supposedly drives humanity's expansion into space. That is not the open, transparent, collaborative approach to science that has powered every major discovery in modern astronomy. And yet, that is where we find ourselves. In the dark, looking up at the stars, wondering what our spacecraft saw when they turned their cameras toward 3I Atlas, wondering why the images were taken away, wondering when, if ever, we will be allowed to see what our own technology discovered about this visitor from beyond our solar system. The blackout continues. The silence persists. The questions multiply. And somewhere in a secure facility, on classified servers, in restricted databases, the images exist. The data sits waiting. The truth about 3I Atlas, whatever that truth might be, remains locked behind doors we cannot open, protected by protocols we are not allowed to understand, classified for reasons we are not permitted to know. This is where the story stands now. This is the state of our knowledge about one of the most significant astronomical events of our time. An interstellar visitor arrived, our best spacecraft observed it, and then the curtain came down. The show ended before we saw the finale. The data disappeared before we could analyze it. The moment passed and left us only with shadows and questions and the uncomfortable knowledge that someone somewhere decided we should not be allowed to see what they saw. Perhaps April will bring answers. Perhaps the release date will be honored and the data will flow and we will finally learn what 3I Atlas really is. Perhaps the images will show a normal comet with slightly unusual but ultimately explicable properties. Perhaps the mystery will dissolve in the light of full disclosure and we will wonder why there was ever any secrecy at all. Or perhaps April will bring new delays. Perhaps the data will remain locked. Perhaps we will discover that the pattern continues, that the blackout persists, that the decision to withhold this information runs deeper and broader than we imagined. Perhaps we will learn that some discoveries are not meant to be shared, that some truths are too destabilizing, that some visitors are too important to discuss openly. Either way, we will be watching, we will be checking the archives. We will be asking questions, because this is not just about one object or one set of observations. This is about whether space science remains open and transparent. This is about whether the public has a right to know what our spacecraft discover. This is about whether we are willing to accept silence as an answer when the questions involve visitors from the stars. The blackout may continue, but the pressure for truth cannot be sustained forever. Someone will speak. Something will leak. The data will emerge eventually, because information wants to be free and secrets this significant cannot be kept indefinitely. When that moment comes, when the images finally appear, when we see what Psyche saw, and what HiRISE captured and what the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter recorded, we will know whether the silence was justified or whether it was simply the final act of institutions that could not handle a truth too large for their protocols to contain. Until then, we have only the gaps in the archive, the dates set impossibly far in the future, the pattern of systematic withholding that tells us something significant happened, something that required this level of control, something that someone decided we were not ready to see. We have only the knowledge that 3I Atlas came from beyond our solar system, passed through our neighborhood, was observed by our best instruments, and then vanished into classified databases where the public cannot follow. That is the story of the interstellar blackout. That is the mystery we are left to contemplate. That is the question that hangs over every future mission and every future discovery. What will they tell us next time? What will they hide? And when will we finally have the courage to demand that the exploration of space, funded by public money and conducted in the name of all humanity, remains truly open to all humanity? The stars are watching. The universe is vast, and somewhere out there, other objects are traveling through the void, heading perhaps toward our solar system, carrying perhaps answers to questions we have asked for generations. When they arrive, will we see them? Will the data flow? Will transparency prevail? Or will the blackout continue, the archives stay dark, and the most important discoveries of our time remain locked behind classifications we cannot challenge and silence we cannot break? That choice is being made right now, in the decisions about 3I Atlas, in the delays and gaps and systematic withholding that define this moment. That choice will echo into the future, setting precedents that will govern how we handle every subsequent discovery, every future visitor, every observation that challenges our understanding of what is possible in the cosmos. The blackout is not just about one object, it is about who controls the narrative of human discovery. It is about who decides what truths are safe to share. It is about whether we trust ourselves with the knowledge that we are not alone, that the universe is full of wonders we are only beginning to glimpse, that the stars are not empty but populated with travelers and visitors, and perhaps even civilizations that dwarf our own. Someone made the decision to turn off the cameras. Someone chose to lock the data away. Someone decided that this moment, this discovery, this visitor required silence instead of celebration. And until we know who made that decision and why, until we see the images that were taken and hidden, until transparency returns to the exploration of space, we are left in the dark, wondering what we missed, what we lost, and what we might never be allowed to know about the day an interstellar visitor came to call, and our institutions chose secrecy over truth.